represent the country. I know some athletes
Yes.
feel that they were badly let down.
Yes, there's an obligation, and I think that we fulfill that obligation. There's an overriding principle of freedom, justice, peace, human rights, morality, those kinds of principles that guide individual lives, nations, governments, and the Olympic movement itself. That's overriding, and that's what we honored. There's also an obligation by our government to give due credit and recognition to superb athletes who prepare for the Olympic Games. I think this was done.
You have done more to uphold the Olympic ideal than any other group of athletes in our history. I salute you for it, and the American people salute you for it also. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. God bless every one of you.
What does it take to excel?
You have my word.
Mr. President, you probably know that Lord Callanan, who was the head of the International Olympic Committee at the time of the 1980 Olympics, has written his memoirs. They have not yet been published in the United States, but in any case, we have obtained a copy. And one thing he says, one of a number of things he says, is that you turned the Olympic arena into a battleground. The White House attitude was arrogant, ignorant, and high-handed. Have you had any contact with Callanan? You did at the time.
At the time, not since then, no.
Are you surprised by his...
No, somewhat. I can't deny that the United States point of view was very forceful, expressed by me, by both houses of Congress, by officials all over the country.
Secretary Vance.
Secretary Vance, also the U.S. Olympic Committee, which made the final decision. And I think the policy of a few officials in the International Olympics Committee was to go to the Soviet Union regardless, as was the case with the IOC in 1936, when Hitler was invading country after country in Europe, and the Olympics held in Berlin on that date was used as a major propaganda effort to show that Hitler's policies were endorsed by the rest of the world. But the IOC has always been quite supine, in my judgment, in agreeing to go to a country, even insisting upon going to a country regardless of that country's attitudes toward the basic Olympic principles.
I think that people who went to the games were not thinking in terms. A lot of them came back very critical of the bureaucracy and the things they encountered. In the same way, many people returned from Berlin having learnt from being there, not from abstaining, but from going there they learned.
I don't know if Mr. Callanan expresses any disapproval of the Soviet invasion or their attempt to subjugate Afghanistan with literally tens of thousands of people killed by Soviet troops against a free and independent and peace-loving country. If his criticism is focused exclusively on the policies of the United States, I think his book is highly biased. But if it's balanced by his disappointment in not being able to see the U.S. team and 55 other teams in the Olympics, then I can understand his chagrin.
We wrote very firmly and asked the Russians, the Soviets, to make the conditions more suitable and the atmosphere better for the game. So that is a diplomatic way of saying, please get out of Afghanistan. It couldn't be plainer than that.
We did offer to support either a permanent Olympic site in the original place in Greece, where the Olympiad commenced centuries ago, or to have a postponement from Moscow to a more suitable site for 1980 or the subsequent year. That's right. But we left the eventual decision up to the IOC.
I thought that he was a man with the best intentions in the world, but I didn't think he had all the best advice. And this is what worried me. I found that in Moscow that they were pretty well briefed on the workings, for instance, even the workings of sport. And I had a feeling that President Carter had not been fully briefed, had not done all the homework that was necessary before embarking on this type of action.
Well, to continue with Lord Callanan, he also wrote this: there are good, sound, practical reasons as well as moral ones for dissuading politicians from using sport as a means to an end. Now, I suppose that what he is implying there is that, say, in 1984, if some country objects to the United States policy at that time, we might find that country deciding not to go to Los Angeles.
That's always a possibility, and I think as was brought out in the 1980 debate, there had been many times when individual countries had decided not to go to the Olympics to express some disapproval of another nation's policies. I certainly don't approve of that. In my judgment, the holding of the Olympics in a nation which at that time has been overwhelmingly condemned by the international community for brutal aggression is a special case, and it was warranted for 56 nations not to go to the Olympics, contrary to what Mr. Callanan says.
What should we conclude about the 1980 boycott? Well, it might be better if politics could be kept out of sports, but that's a naive dream. There is no way to insulate sports from what goes on in the rest of the world. Now, it probably is not true that every cloud must have a silver lining, but some clouds do. The 1980 boycott deprived many of our athletes of the greatest glory they could have known in their lifetimes and left them with a place in Olympic history only because they did not compete. But it also focused attention on our hopes for 1984, especially with the games being held in this country. New sources of money turned up. There was greater support for the Olympic training camp at Colorado Springs.